The arena fell silent as two titans stepped into the octagon that night in Hong Kong. I've covered fights for 30 years, but nothing prepared me for what I witnessed when Donnie Yen faced Michael Jai White in what would become the most talked about martial arts exhibition of the decade. The crowd of 12,000 packed a convention center knew they were about to witness history. On one side stood the master of Wing Chun, the man who brought Ip Man to life on screen with such authenticity that Bruce Lee's lineage seemed to flow through his very veins. On the other, an American powerhouse whose kicks could shatter concrete and whose speed defied the laws of physics for a man his size. Yen entered first, his signature calm radiating through the arena like ripples on still water. At 59, the Hong Kong legend moved with the fluid precision that made him cinema's most believable martial artist. His compact 5'8" frame carried decades of Wing Chun mastery, each step deliberate, each breath controlled. The centerline theory that governed his fighting philosophy was evident even in his walk to the ring. Every movement conserved energy while maintaining perfect balance. But Yen's greatest weapon wasn't his legendary chain punches or his lightning-fast trapping techniques. It was his ability to read opponents like an open book, adapting mid-fight with the chess master's mind that had made him unbeatable on film and formidable in real competition during his younger days. Then came White, and the energy shifted like a thunderstorm rolling in. The American giant stood 6'1", his frame carrying 210 pounds of perfectly conditioned muscle. At 55, he moved with the explosive power that earned him 7 black belts across different disciplines. His background as a genuine tournament champion gave him something most movie martial artists lacked: real ring experience under pressure. White's arsenal was devastating in its variety. Kokushin karate had given him bone-crushing power. Taekwondo provided those picture-perfect high kicks that could decapitate an opponent. His Shotokan background meant his fundamentals were flawless. But perhaps most dangerously, his years studying wushu had taught him to blend styles seamlessly, making him unpredictable. The bell rang, and both fighters circled each other like predators assessing their prey. Round 1 belonged to the feeling out process. Yen stayed in his familiar Wing Chun stance, hands positioned perfectly on his center line, while White assumed a more traditional karate position. The American threw the first technique, a lightning-fast jab that Yen deflected with a simple paksao. The crowd erupted as Yen immediately countered with a chain punch combination that White barely managed to block. But White's reach advantage became apparent quickly. His longer limbs kept Yen at bay, forcing the Wing Chun master to work harder to close distance. When White unleashed his first real kick, a picture-perfect side kick to the midsection, Yen's eyes widened slightly. The power was legitimate. Round 2 saw the first real fireworks. Yen began implementing his sticky hands technique, trying to trap White's arms and neutralize that dangerous reach. For 30 seconds, it worked beautifully. Yen controlled White's lead hand while peppering him with short, sharp punches that accumulated damage. The crowd was on its feet as Yen seemed to be solving the puzzle. Then White adapted. Using his superior strength, he broke free from Yen's trapping and immediately went high with a roundhouse kick that whistled past Yen's ear. The message was clear: stay close and pay the price. By round 3, both men had tasted each other's power and respected what they faced. White began mixing his attacks more cleverly, using low kicks to compromise Yen's mobility before following with hand techniques. His tournament experience showed as he controlled distance expertly, keeping Yen in that dangerous middle range where Wing Chun's close quarters dominance couldn't fully manifest. Yen, meanwhile, began using his footwork more creatively. Instead of trying to muscle his way inside, he started using angles, slipping White's attacks and countering from unexpected positions. When he caught White overcommitting to a spinning back kick, Yen's counter was poetry in motion, a simultaneous block and strike that had White stumbling backward. The turning point came in round 4. White, perhaps growing overconfident with his reach control, attempted an ambitious jumping kick. But Yen read it perfectly, stepping off the center line while simultaneously trapping White's supporting leg. What happened next defied belief. In one fluid motion, Yen swept White's base while delivering a perfect straight punch that caught the American flesh on the jaw. White hit the canvas hard, and for a moment, the convention center held its breath. The giant slowly rose, his eyes slightly glazed, but his fighting spirit intact. The knockdown had shifted the momentum completely, and Yen sensed blood in the water. Round 5 was controlled chaos. Yen pressed his advantage with the relentless forward pressure that Wing Chun is famous for. His chain punches came in waves, forcing White to cover up and retreat. But the American's conditioning and heart shone through. Even hurt, he managed to land a crushing body kick that doubled Yen over and reminded everyone why he'd been a tournament champion. The final round was a war of wills as much as skills. Both men were exhausted, their techniques slightly less crisp, but their determination burning brighter than ever. White, knowing he needed something spectacular, began throwing everything in his arsenal. High kicks, spinning techniques, powerful punches, all delivered with the desperation of a man who refused to lose. The final round was a war of wills as much as skills. Both men were exhausted, their techniques slightly less crisp, but their determination burning brighter than ever. White, knowing he needed something spectacular, began throwing everything in his arsenal. High kicks, spinning techniques, powerful punches, all delivered with the desperation of a man who refused to lose. But Yen's experience and ring IQ proved decisive. As White committed to a final, devastating spinning heel kick, Yen did what Wing Chun masters do best. He found the simplest solution to a complex problem. A subtle step forward, a perfect Tan Sao deflection, and suddenly White was off balance and vulnerable. The final exchange lasted 3 seconds but felt like an eternity. Yen's simultaneous attack and defense, the core principle of Wing Chun, manifested in its purest form. As White's kick sailed harmlessly past, Yen's straight punch found its mark with surgical precision, dropping the American for the second and final time. When the referee called the fight, Donnie Yen had proven that sometimes the most direct path really is the most effective. His mastery of centerline theory, combined with decades of experience reading opponents, had overcome White's physical advantages and diverse skill set. The smaller man's efficiency had trumped the larger man's power, and Wing Chun's philosophy of simultaneous attack and defense had once again proven its battlefield effectiveness. In the end, Yen won not just with technique, but with the wisdom that comes from truly understanding one's art at its deepest level.